The morning sun spilled over the misty ridge as Daniel and Mateo struck their shovels into the damp soil, unaware that this day would carve their names into tragedy. A dull metallic clang echoed from beneath the dirt, freezing them in disbelief. They knelt, breathless, as Daniel brushed away the mud to reveal the glint of something pure, golden, and impossible. In that instant, laughter erupted, raw, astonished, alive. But behind Daniel's eyes, a shadow flickered. What happens when a lie becomes the only truth you live in? Mateo whispered that this was fate, a blessing for both. Yet Daniel's smile lingered too long, too sharp. Is wealth worth losing your soul or your peace? As the wind howled through the trees, Daniel's hand slowly covered the gold, and a silence thick as guilt settled between them. The walk home was quiet, their boots crunching on gravel. Mateo spoke of plans. A new house, a gift for Sophia, a better life. Daniel nodded, but his mind roared with greed's whisper. Every image of gold in the dirt replayed behind his eyes, shimmering brighter each time. The world suddenly felt small, his friends smaller. He wondered, why share destiny when it could belong to him alone? Mateo's laughter broke his thoughts, a sound that now felt mocking. The path between them, though narrow, began to widen with every step. That night over dinner, Sophia's laughter filled the small house. She noticed Daniel's silence, his distant stare, the way he gripped his cup too tightly. Mateo spoke with warmth, telling her they had a lucky day. Sophia's intuition stirred. She sensed something hidden behind those words. Daniel forced a grin, saying little, watching the glow of the fire dance like the gold still buried in his mind. The flicker painted his face in gold and shadow, half man, half sea. Later that night, Daniel stood outside beneath the stars. The mountain loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette whispering temptation. He replayed every word, every look, until one truth took root. Mateo didn't deserve half. His breath clouded in the cold air as he made his decision. Tomorrow, he'd return alone. The wind moaned through the trees, as if warning him. But greed had already deafened him to reason. Before dawn, Daniel rose quietly, his boots crunching softly on frost. He glanced once at the sleeping village and turned toward the mountain path. The first light broke over the peaks as he climbed, alone, haunted, hungry. In his chest burned both excitement and guilt. Every step felt heavier, every shadow longer. The gold waited for him, whispering promises that would soon cost more than he could ever pay. The forest was still when Daniel reached the clearing again. He uncovered the gold as though performing a ritual, the cold metal gleaming like sin. His thoughts raced. How easily Mateo trusted him. How foolish that was. Daniel packed part of the gold into a small cloth bag, hiding the rest beneath stones and roots. Each bar felt heavier than his conscience, but his smile grew with every piece. He whispered that he deserved this, that he had waited long enough for fortune. But deep inside, a voice asked if this fortune would feed him or devour him. Back in the village, Daniel handed Mateo a smaller bag than the one he'd carried down the path. Half, he lied easily. Mateo smiled, grateful, unaware of the missing weight. The simplicity of his friend's trust twisted like a knife in Daniel's chest, yet he silenced the pain with thoughts of power. They buried the gold together beneath Daniel's shed for safety. That night, as Mateo drank to their future, Daniel could not meet his eyes. In his heart, the friendship already felt like something he had traded cheaply. Sophia noticed the change before anyone else. Daniel visited often now, speaking fast, avoiding her eyes. His laughter felt forced, and his compliments hollow. When she asked about their newfound luck, his words tangled like vines. Later that night, she told Mateo, "Be careful, love changes under gold." Mateo chuckled and brushed it off, but her words stayed in the air, heavy as the truth itself. Outside, the wind carried Daniel's silhouette past their window, moving like a man hunted by his own desires. One evening, Mateo found Daniel alone at the local tavern, counting money he'd claimed to have earned from trading tools. The coins clinked with a sound that made Mateo's heart sink. He knew Daniel's pride, and this story didn't fit. When he asked where it came from, Daniel laughed too quickly, his eyes darting to the door. The lie was small, but its echo filled the room. Mateo walked home through the dark, the first seed of doubt buried deep inside him. Days later, Daniel could no longer sleep. The gold beneath his shed seemed to whisper his name. He dreamed of Mateo discovering everything, of Sophia's eyes turning from him in disgust. To quiet the guilt, he began to plan. He'd tell Mateo the ground near the shed wasn't safe, that they should move the gold to another hiding place. Alone. The thought brought him strange comfort. As he rehearsed his lie in the mirror, his reflection didn't look like him anymore. Mateo arrived early one morning to help Daniel move the gold as planned. But when they dug beneath the shed, the hole was half empty. Daniel froze, pretending surprise. Maybe someone found it, he said too quickly. Mateo's heart pounded. He knew no one else had access. His eyes searched Daniel's face, the shifting gaze, the clenched jaw, the guilt dressed as panic. The silence between them was heavier than the missing treasure. Mateo didn't speak. He only stood there, the warmth of years of friendship turning cold in a single breath. Daniel tried to calm him. He spoke quickly, saying thieves might have watched them, or maybe an animal dragged the bag away. But every word made the lie thinner. Mateo's stare was quiet, unreadable. "Are you sure you didn't take any?" he asked softly. And Daniel's laugh came too sharp, too rehearsed. The air between them filled with things unsaid. They both stood, each knowing what the other feared, yet neither brave enough to admit it aloud. It was the moment their friendship began to break, silently, like glass under pressure. Sophia saw the tension the next day. Mateo's laughter had vanished, replaced by silence and restless pacing. Daniel avoided their home now, though his guilt followed him like a shadow. When Sophia asked what was wrong, Mateo only shook his head. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the people you trust most build the deepest holes." She didn't press further, but her eyes turned toward the mountain, where she knew the answer waited under layers of earth and lies. Daniel's guilt soon turned to anger. He told himself that Mateo had grown greedy first, that he didn't deserve his share. In the tavern that night, Daniel whispered to a stranger, an old miner with greedy eyes, offering to sell something valuable. The stranger's interest burned like fuel to his ego. As Daniel described the gold, his voice steadied, his guilt dulled. The lie was no longer a burden. It had become his shield, and he wore it proudly, mistaking corruption for strength. When Mateo discovered Daniel had been seen trading gold coins in the nearby town, his last doubt shattered. He walked the long road home in silence, the truth sinking like stones in his chest. That night, rain fell hard, pounding the roof like judgment. Sophia begged him not to confront Daniel in anger, but Mateo's voice was calm. "It's not about the gold anymore," he said. "It's about who we became when we found it." He stepped out into the storm, leaving her standing in the doorway, heart heavy with dread. Daniel felt the weight of Mateo's footsteps long before he heard the knock. Rain still whispered against the roof when his door burst open, and there stood Mateo, soaked, silent, eyes full of betrayal. Daniel tried to speak, but the words fell apart between them. For a long, cruel moment, neither moved. Then Mateo said softly, "You stole from me." The words hung in the air like thunder. That never fades. Daniel denied it, but the lie cracked as soon as it left his lips. Friendship had turned to fire, and both men were already burning. Mateo's voice rose, anger breaking through years of loyalty. "We were brothers," he shouted, his fist slamming against the wall. Daniel's temper flared back, rage fueled by guilt. They argued until their voices became the storm itself, hurling every memory, every betrayal, every ounce of trust that once bound them. When silence finally returned, it felt hollow. Matteo turned away first. Daniel's chest heaved, eyes glassy with something darker than regret. The bond that once made them strong had become a chain choking them both. After Matteo left, Daniel sat alone in silence. His heart pounded, hands shaking as he stared at the floor. In his mind, Matteo was no longer a friend. He was a threat. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind sounded like footsteps coming for him. By midnight, Daniel had loaded his rifle and locked the door. Outside, the rain had stopped, but in his head, the storm kept raging. Fear had finally taken the place of gold. Matteo couldn't sleep either. He wandered the forest paths until dawn, thinking of the man he once called brother. He wanted to forgive, but the wound ran too deep. Sophia found him by the stream, hands trembling, eyes tired. "Don't go back there," she begged. He nodded, but his silence betrayed him. In his heart, he knew he would return, because forgiveness was weaker than pride had already begun its work. By evening, Daniel was no longer thinking clearly. He packed what remained of the gold into a sack and stared at the mountain's shadow. In his twisted reasoning, he decided to confront Matteo first, to prove he was not afraid to take control. As he stepped outside, the wind rose again, whispering warnings he refused to hear. He looked toward the ridge where the treasure first appeared and muttered, "It started there, it ends there." His footsteps faded into the growing dark, carrying him toward his own downfall. Daniel waited at the foot of the mountain as darkness settled, the sack of gold glinting faintly under moonlight. He had sent a message to Matteo earlier that day. "Come to the ridge. We'll finish this." The words sounded peaceful, but inside him churned violence disguised as resolve. He told himself it was fairness, that he only wanted closure. But his trembling hands betrayed the truth. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that this night would end with only one man walking back down the mountain. Matteo arrived just before midnight, carrying only a lantern. The light trembled between them as they faced each other on the rocky ridge where their fortune had begun. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Matteo said, "We could have shared everything." Daniel's reply was bitter. "I did share. Until you started watching me like a thief." The silence that followed was sharper than any blade. It was the sound of a friendship dying for the second and final time. Their voices rose again, echoing through the cliffs. Daniel shouted that he'd earned the gold, that fate had chosen him. Matteo's anger broke at last, his voice trembling with heartbreak. "You were my brother," he cried, "and you traded me for stones." Daniel stepped forward, eyes blazing with madness, and struck him across the face. The lantern fell, glass shattering, flame flickering dangerously on the dry leaves. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Two men stood in the glow of a dying light, too far gone to turn back. The fight erupted without thought. Two lives crashing together after years of brotherhood. Fists, shouts, and broken memories filled the air. Daniel swung wildly, desperation overpowering reason. Matteo fought to defend, not destroy, but his strength faltered under betrayal's weight. As they stumbled near the cliff's edge, lightning tore across the sky, revealing their faces, rage and regret, side by side. One final shove, one moment of panic, and Matteo slipped. His scream vanished into the roar of thunder below. When silence returned, Daniel stood trembling at the cliff's edge, staring into the darkness below. The rain washed blood from his hands, but not from his heart. He called Matteo's name once. No answer. The sack of gold lay scattered at his feet, shining faintly under the storm. He gathered it slowly, each bar heavier than the last, until his knees buckled under the weight. In that moment, he realized the truth. He had won nothing. He'd only traded the only person who ever loved him for a grave full of gold. Days passed before anyone noticed Matteo was missing. The storm had erased all tracks, but Sophia knew before the villagers spoke. Something inside her had gone silent. When Daniel came to her door, his eyes were hollow, his clothes still stained with mud. He said Mateo had gone searching for answers. His words trembled, but his smile did. Sophia looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "You already know where he is, don't you?" Daniel froze, unable to lie convincingly anymore. Guilt filled the space between them, heavier than grief itself. That night, Sophia followed her instincts and climbed the path toward the mountain. The air was still damp, filled with the scent of pine and fear. Near the ridge, she found broken soil, footprints, and something glimmering half buried in the mud. A single gold bar. Her breath caught as she knelt to lift it. Its cold weight told her everything she needed to know. The gold was beautiful, yes, but it felt like holding death itself. She fell to her knees and whispered Mateo's name to the wind, her tears mixing with rainwater and dirt. Daniel could no longer sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Mateo's hands slipping, heard his voice swallowed by thunder. The gold he had hidden now mocked him, its glow turning sickly under candlelight. He tried to bury it again, but each time it seemed to find its way back into his home, into his dreams. The villagers started to whisper. Sophia stopped speaking to him entirely. Alone with the treasure, Daniel realized it wasn't gold that cursed him. It was his own reflection in its shine. Sophia returned to the village, her face pale but resolute. She carried the gold bar wrapped in cloth and laid it on the church altar. The priest asked where it came from, but she said only, "It took 2 lives to find this." The villagers whispered prayers, crossing themselves. Some called it cursed, others called it justice. As the candlelight glowed upon the gold, it seemed less like treasure and more like a tombstone for everything that had been lost to greed. By the time Sophia returned home, Daniel was gone. His cabin stood open, door swinging in the wind. Inside, the floor was bare. No gold, no footprints, only silence. Some said he left to escape guilt. Others said he followed the mountain's call again. But Sophia knew better. She stood at the threshold, her tears dry, her voice soft. "He never left," she whispered. "He's still digging. Only this time it's his own grave." The wind carried her words away, blending with the endless rustle of leaves and regret. The mountain was silent when Daniel returned, hollow-eyed and worn. Days had blurred into nights. Hunger no longer mattered. He followed the same trail where he and Mateo had once laughed, where gold had first glimmered beneath the soil. Every step echoed like a confession. When he reached the ridge, he fell to his knees, clutching the last gold bar against his chest. "Take it back!" he whispered to the earth. "It's poisoned." But the wind gave no mercy, only the endless hush of judgment. The gold slipped from his hands, sinking slowly into the dirt where it had first been found. Back in the village, Sophia stood outside the church, listening to the bells toll for morning prayer. She had stopped asking about Daniel, stopped hoping for his return. Yet deep down she knew the mountain would never let him go. Not until his sins were buried alongside his greed. As the bells echoed across the valley, she whispered a quiet prayer, not for justice, but for peace. Because sometimes, she thought, peace is all that remains when love and trust have turned to dust. That evening, Daniel's voice echoed faintly through the forest, half prayer, half madness. He spoke to Mateo as if he were beside him, begging forgiveness from a ghost. "You were my brother," he murmured. "I only wanted enough to live." His voice broke, carried by the wind into the valley below. The forest seemed to breathe with him, mourn with him. Then came the sound of stones shifting, a quiet collapse. When silence returned, Daniel's voice was gone, but the mountain had gained one more secret. When the villagers found the ridge days later, they discovered nothing but scattered gold bars half buried in mud. Sophia stood among them, silent as the others whispered about curses and punishment. She didn't believe in curses, only in choices. She gathered one bar, placed it in her hands, and said quietly, "This isn't gold. It's everything we lost trying to own it." No one spoke. The wind blew softly through the trees, carrying her words down the valley like a warning for those who still dreamed of riches. Years later, the mountain remained untouched. The villagers told stories of two friends who found gold but lost their souls. Children whispered Daniel and Mateo's names like a cautionary prayer. And Sophia, now older, would sit by the window each evening, watching the sunset over the peaks. She no longer feared greed. She pitied it, because she had seen what it could do. Turn laughter into silence, love into ruin, and life into memory. As the last light faded, she asked one final question into the wind. "Is wealth worth losing your soul or your peace?" The silence answered truthfully,